This is ChainMind, the decentralized AI network built for everyone. Just search ChainMind on Google, sign up, download the app, and you're in. That's it. You've joined the network. Run it on any device, phone, laptop, or server. Why ChainMind? Fully decentralized, fully yours.
The wind that whistles through the canyons of southeastern Arizona carries a story older than any treaty or campaign promise. It's the story of a single cottonwood, a living archive that has watched 200 years of rain, fire, and people come and go. If a concrete wall were to rise where its roots stretch, that story could be cut off, and the lesson it carries for our nation would be lost forever. We start with the tree itself, a populous deltoids that locals have affectionately named the grandmother tree. It does more than shade a picnic spot, it anchors an entire riparian ecosystem. Its deep, interwoven roots hold the soil in place, filter the runoff that would otherwise turn the San Rafael River into a silt-laden torrent, and provide the cool, shaded water that trout and amphibians need to survive the scorching high desert summer. When the Arizona Game and Fish Department measured the canopy in 2021, they found a 30% loss of foliage over the previous decade, a decline driven by a perfect storm of drought, invasive beetles, and a fire regime that no longer follows the natural rhythm of the landscape. That loss is a symptom, not a cause. It signals that the whole watershed is under stress, and the cottonwood is the canary in the coal mine for a region that balances tourism, modest agriculture, and a fragile cultural heritage. Since the 2016 election, the idea of a physical barrier along the U.S.-Mexico border has become a lightning rod for partisan debate. Proponents paint a picture of steel and concrete as an impenetrable shield that will stop illegal crossings, choke the flow of illicit drugs, and reinforce national security. Opponents, meanwhile, warn that a wall is an expensive, environmentally destructive project that fails to grasp the complexity of life in border communities. Recent legislative drafts have revived the concept of strategic fencing, focusing on high traffic corridors and promising that the structure will be a thin, targeted solution rather than a monolithic wall. The paperwork that should accompany such a proposal, the Environmental Impact Statement required by the National Environmental Policy Act, has been pushed back, watered down, or in some cases, sidestepped under the argument that national security trumps environmental review. The heart of the matter lies in how the proposed fence would intersect the landscape that nurtures the grandmother tree. The design calls for the barrier to follow the low-lying valleys that naturally channel meltwater toward the San Rafael. To lay footings and access roads, heavy equipment would have to compact the thin, rocky soils that the tree's roots have penetrated over centuries. Compacted soil becomes a hard, impermeable crust that forces rainwater to run off the surface instead of soaking in, reducing the amount of moisture that reaches the deep root zone just when the tree needs it most during spring melt-off. Over time, that loss of water can weaken the tree's vascular system, making it more vulnerable to beetle infestations and fungal disease. Soil compaction also accelerates erosion. When the topsoil can't absorb water, it washes away, exposing the tree's shallow roots and destabilizing the very ground that has held it upright for generations. Add to that the inadvertent creation of corridors for invasive plants like tamarisk, also known as salt cedar, which thrives in disturbed terrain. Those invaders pull up water that native species depend on, and they produce a dense canopy that changes fire behavior, turning low-intensity understory burns into high-severity events that can scorch the cottonwood's bark. The fence, intended as a security measure, would become a vector for ecological collapse, a feedback loop where each impact amplifies the next. But here's the part most people get wrong. The damage isn't only about a single tree, it's about the entire community that depends on the health of that tree and the river it nourishes. Patagonia, the small town that gathers under the Cottonwood's shade for festivals and quiet evenings, earns a substantial portion of its income from ecotourism. Visitors come for the riparian trails, the chance to see a desert oasis, and the stories that have been told for generations about a sentinel that stands watch over the canyon. A 2022 study by the University of Arizona calculated that a 10% reduction in river flow, a realistic outcome if a barrier redirects or absorbs seasonal runoff, could shave off more than $1 million a year from local tourism revenue. The same study warned that reduced water would also strain the modest agricultural plots that rely on the river for irrigation, potentially cutting yields and forcing farmers to abandon fields that have been in families for decades. The construction workforce itself would bring a transient population into a town built on low-density living. Temporary housing, increased traffic, and heightened demand for services could overwhelm a limited infrastructure, changing the social fabric of a place that values quiet and connection to the land. And beyond the economic numbers, there are legal mechanisms that should, in theory, act as safeguards. Federal law mandates a full environmental review for projects that could significantly impact the environment, but a 2020 rule change under the previous administration allowed certain border projects to bypass the most rigorous sections of NEPA if they were deemed essential for national security. The current administration has signaled a desire to reinstate stricter standards, yet legal battles drag on, and interim permits can still be issued, leaving vulnerable ecosystems in limbo. Community voices, especially those of the nearby Tohono O'odham Nation, echo a deeper cultural loss. For indigenous peoples, the cottonwood is more than a tree. It is a meeting point of sky and water, a place where stories are told, prayers are whispered, and a relationship with the land is affirmed. Grassroots groups have begun mapping the tree's root zone with ground-penetrating radar, gathering data that could be used in court or in planning discussions. This kind of local science demonstrates that ordinary citizens can produce high-quality information that rivals agency reports, and it underscores the importance of involving those who know the land intimately when decisions are being made. If we accept that a concrete wall would bring such a cascade of environmental, economic, and cultural harms, the question becomes, what are the alternatives that still address legitimate concerns about border security? Experts suggest a suite of low-impact solutions. First, technology-driven surveillance can monitor crossings without a physical presence. Drones equipped with infrared cameras, sensor networks that detect movement, and AI-powered analytics can pinpoint illegal activity in real time, allowing law enforcement to respond where it's needed rather than building a blanket barrier. Second, designating cross-border conservation corridors could keep critical wildlife pathways open while focusing enforcement on known hotspots. Such corridors would protect the movement of species like the endangered Mexican gray wolf, the jaguarundi, and even the Gila trout that depend on clean, flowing water. Third, community-based patrols could enlist ranchers and indigenous groups who have intimate knowledge of the terrain, creating a partnership model that both deters illegal activity and reinforces stewardship of the land. Finally, investing in flood control infrastructure that serves both security and agriculture, like strategically placed check dams or water storage basins, can turn a perceived conflict into a win-win scenario, ensuring water availability for the cottonwood, the river, and the farms that line it. Preserving the grandmother tree itself will require focused actions that can be taken even as the policy debate continues. Restoring the hydrology of the riparian zone through upstream check dams and riparian buffers would ensure a steadier flow of water during the dry months when the tree is most stressed. Soil health can be improved by aerating compacted ground, applying organic mulches, and planting native shrubs that help retain moisture and provide shade for seedlings. Regular removal of invasive tamarisk and cheatgrass, paired with planting of native species, would reduce competition for water and lower fire risk. Monitoring devices like dendrometers, which measure the tree's growth in real time, and remote sensing cameras can provide data on stress indicators, allowing rapid response if construction activity begins to affect the tree. Legal advocacy remains crucial. Leveraging the Endangered Species Act and the renewed NEPA review process can force a thorough assessment before any construction proceeds. The larger lesson here is that every large infrastructure project sends ripples through ecosystems, economies, and cultures. A single wall, built to address a political priority, can become a catalyst for irreversible loss if the broader context is ignored. Policymakers must weigh short-term political wins against the long-term health of watersheds, wildlife, and the communities that have built their identities around those landscapes. By integrating robust environmental review, embracing low-impact technologies, and genuinely engaging the people who call the border home, the United States can protect its borders without erasing the living history embodied in a 2-century-old cottonwood. As the national conversation on border infrastructure evolves, the fate of the grandmother tree will serve as a litmus test. Will the next legislative session prioritize high-tech, low-impact strategies that keep the tree, the river, and the wildlife thriving? Or will the appeal of a concrete barrier drown out the subtle, yet urgent, warning that a single sentinel in the desert is already showing signs of stress? The answer we choose will shape not only the landscape of southeastern Arizona but also the moral compass of a nation that claims to value both security and stewardship. If this story sparked your curiosity, if you feel the need to see how technology can be a bridge rather than a barrier, join us at Chain Mind. Follow our channel for deeper dives into the hidden connections between policy, the environment, and the emerging decentralized AI tools that can help us protect what matters most. Together we can turn insight into action, and make sure that stories like the grandmother trees are never silenced.